Hi friends, I'm here today to talk to you about back pain at the loom and how we can avoid it. I want to start out by saying that these tips are all from my personal experience. I don't actually have any medical background, and if you are having concerns with your health in any way, please see a medical practitioner. Have you checked out the online weaving school yet? We have memberships and single purchase classes and all kinds of fun things happening over there. So make sure that you go over and check it out. So the topic of back pain is something that I get asked about quite a bit, and it's something that I know quite a lot about. A little bit of my history: when I was 17, I had a horse riding accident, and that left me with a back injury that has affected me throughout my adult life. There was a time in my life over a period of about 3 years where it was particularly bad, and I didn't actually think at that time that I would ever be able to sit and weave at a floor loom. Thankfully, I got some really good treatment. That's one of the points that I want to talk about in this video. But the treatment combined with all of these things that I'm going to talk about today mean that I can weave on all sorts of looms. I know my own limitations and I know what I need to do in order to avoid back pain. The first thing I want to do is talk about seating, because I think this is one of the most important things that you need to think about when sitting at the loom. Now, a lot of floor looms have a bench available that you can purchase at the same time as you purchase your loom. I chose not to purchase an actual weaving bench, and I'm really glad that I made that decision. Instead, I chose an adjustable piano bench. I'm going to take you to my loom right now, and we're going to have a look at my piano bench and about other important aspects of how you should be sitting at your loom. So this is my height adjustable piano bench. It has these knobs at the sides, so all you have to do is turn the knobs and the bench will go either up or down. And this is something that I think is really crucial for being seated at the loom, because the height is really important. If you notice, my feet are on the treadles, that my hips are higher than my legs, and this is really important because if you're sitting down really low and your legs are kind of raised up at an angle, that's going to put a lot of strain on your lower back. So you want to be sitting at a comfortable height where you can rest your elbows on the breastbeam quite easily, and that you have that angling down of the legs rather than angling up, that your hips are always going to be higher than your knees. That means that when you're treadling, when you're moving your legs around, you're not putting the strain because you're using your legs rather than putting the strain on your lower back. Also, it's really important to be sitting up as straight as you can. Sometimes it doesn't feel so natural to sit up straight, but we do have the breastbeam here, and that sort of helps and encourages and reminds us to have that straight back. If you find yourself kind of slumping like this, that's not going to be good over a long period of time. And it also might mean, once again, that your seating is too low and that you need to raise it up so that you have that elbows resting comfortably, and then you can just sit nice and straight. Another reason for being raised up that little bit higher is when you're throwing your shuttle, if you're sitting down low, you're raising your arms up to the weaving to throw your shuttle. But if you're sitting up nice and high and straight backed, then it's a very natural movement. Your arms are sort of moving out to the sides rather than raising them. Pay attention to when you're throwing your shuttle that you're not throwing it at weird angles or lifting your arms at strange angles. That's going to put more strain on your shoulders and your neck, and then in turn that's going to refer down to the lower back. So another thing that I really like about my piano stool is that it is much wider this way than a traditional weaving bench. If you've seen weaving benches, or if you have one, they're actually quite narrow to sit on. And that didn't really appeal to me because my lower half is quite generous, and I wanted to have something that would be able to take my lower half with an even spread so that I could sort of center myself. And the piano bench is perfect for that because it has that extra bit of width that I can just sit right in the middle of the bench and it accommodates me perfectly, and then I can just focus on my posture, sitting up straight, and on the actual weaving and not have to worry about anything there. I also really like that this piano stool is padded. Most weaving benches that you can purchase, they won't be padded, and a lot of weavers will put some extra padding on, whether it's a cushion or a sheepskin or whatever they want to put on it. I don't really like that idea, because if you are applying something to a hard surface, then it's likely to slip around as you move. But with something that has built-in padding, you don't have to worry about that. It's never going to move as you move. Now, another thing that I wanted to point out while you're weaving is, although I'm saying to sit up straight and rest your elbows, that's all true, but you want to be natural in your movements as well. So if you're throwing the shuttle from side to side, you want to be moving your body ever so slightly with that as well, rather than being completely rigid and robotic about it, which is going to wear on you over time. So just like when you're at the warping board, if you can move and shift your weight a little bit, that's going to be much better for you over time, and you'll notice that when you get to standing up from the loom, you won't be as stiff as if you were just sitting very rigidly in your movements. This piano stool has 4 legs, so it's very stable. I like the 4 legs. Not all weaving benches have that either. Sometimes they have 2 legs with these kind of other legs at the bottom, but this one is quite stable, and I really like that as well. If you're looking at a piano stool to buy, I would recommend that you spend a little bit more rather than a little bit less. With this particular bench, I have had this for a few years now, but I spent a little bit less, around 100 Australian dollars, and it came in a box and had to be assembled. I find that the parts get loose and need to be tightened regularly, which is not such a great thing for something that you want to be sitting on and you want to be sturdy. It's very sturdy at the moment because it's been tightened recently, but I do recommend that you spend a little bit more, and when this one does eventually wear out, I will definitely be spending more than I did for this one, and I'll be looking for a really quality piano stool. Here's another little added bonus. Piano stools often have a lid that lifts up, and you can store things underneath, like I store my threading hooks and things like that that are easily lost, and my S hooks and extra heddles and things like that. That's really handy as well. The last thing that I want to mention here is your treadle height. So when you do your tie up, you want to have your treadles as close to the ground as possible. Now these ones are tied up and these ones aren't, but this is the distance between the floor and the top bar of the loom where the treadles sit when they're tied up. The shorter this distance is, the easier it's going to be on your back to be able to depress those treadles over and over. So if you have an older loom and the treadles are very high, which is quite common, I personally would be doing whatever I could to modify that in order to have those treadles hanging lower, so that when I press down, I don't have very far to the floor in order to press. And also, if you have a more modern loom, like this one, my David Louet, the treadling is very easy because of the spring system at the top of the loom. So if you're looking for a loom to buy, have a look out for things like that as well. They're important for your back, and that's definitely was one reason why I purchased this loom. Alright, so now that we've actually had a look at the loom, let's talk about some more things that we can do to prevent the back pain from actually coming on in the first place. I think it's really crucial that you break up your tasks. If you're working at a floor loom, pretty much everything that you do on the loom is going to take a long time, whether it's standing at the warping board, whether it's threading the loom, whether it's warping, dressing the loom, slaying the reed, and then getting to the actual weaving. These are long tasks, especially if you're threading like a full width warp. It could literally take hours. I think sometimes we pressure ourselves to get everything done in one hit, But if you include in your initial planning for this to go over several days, if you in your initial plan are aware that it's going to take a long time, then you are going to be more kind to yourself and give yourself breaks. So I like to put my tasks into sort of batches, and I like to set goals for myself, but if I don't reach the goal for that day, I'm okay with that. So I might say to myself, I want to thread a quarter of this warp today. If I'm halfway through that quarter of threading and things are not going so well, if I'm feeling a bit of pain, then I will just stop, and I will either come back to it later on after I've been for a walk or after I've done some other things. Or if it's not working for me, then I will leave it until I feel better, and then I'll come back to it. One thing that is really going to flare up your back if you do have back problems is sitting at the loom for a long time, or doing one task for too long, standing in one spot for too long, sitting in one spot for too long. And if you're doing something like threading, you are kind of leaning and pulling back this repetitive motion for quite a long time, and so you just have to really think about how you're going to do that and accept that it may take longer than you want it to take. So another useful hint is to accept your bodily limitations. Now, this is really difficult to do. I've really struggled with this over the years because I wanted to be a superwoman. I wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted to do, and that my body would allow me to do that. But reality is, for a lot of us, it just doesn't happen that way. So then we need to look at it with a fresh approach, and to know our limitations and to accept them, and perhaps to be grateful for the things that we can do. So if it takes you 3 weeks to dress your loom, yes, that is a long time, but perhaps you can just be grateful for the fact that you, number one, have a loom, number two, can weave, and number three, that if you take it slow, you can actually do it. It's great if you have your own set of stretches. I'm not going to show you any stretches or exercises to do because that's not within my scope. I have my own stretches that I do when I get up from the loom. Those are the things that have worked for me over time and have helped, and perhaps you already have your own too. Just make sure that you do actually get up from the loom, have a stretch, walk around, do something a little bit different to loosen up all of those muscles before you go back to it again. Okay, so I've talked about what we can do at the loom and while we're weaving to try to avoid this back pain. But what if you already have a flare-up? Well, I had an email from a lady that actually inspired this video a couple of days ago who said that her back was on fire. That is a huge warning signal. That's your body telling you to stop, not to go a little bit slower or to try a different way, but actually to stop what you're doing. So if you have a flare-up, you need to pay full attention to that, because it's only going to get worse if you push yourself and keep going. So the things that are good to do are to rest, absolutely to rest. And by resting, I don't necessarily mean going to bed and lying on your bed, unless you absolutely have to, if it's that bad. I mean still moving around and doing activities, but not doing what you were doing that caused the flare-up. So to rest, to put ice on your back or heat, whatever works for you, to take anti-inflammatories if you need to, but do that in consultation with your doctor and with your own personal experience. But the point is to throw all the water on that fire that you can to get it settled down, and then don't go near your loom again until it's at a really good level. I know this is really hard to do, and some of you even have weaving businesses, you have commissions that you have to finish, but your back health is so crucial, and if you don't look after it, then down the track you're going to be much worse off, and you may end up not being able to weave at all. I also recommend that if your pain persists, if the resting for a few days at least doesn't help, then you need to see someone. whether it's a doctor, whether it's a physical therapist, whether it's a chiropractor, whatever it is. What I've done over the years is I've seen a variety of people and I've stuck with the ones that worked. One thing I do want to say is if you have back pain that's ongoing and chronic, don't despair. When my back was in a really bad way a few years ago, my husband just kept telling me to keep searching for something that would help, for someone who could help. Now, I've been to a lot of people who didn't help at all, and I've found one or two people who really did help, and one in particular who's gotten my back to a really good point so that I no longer at this point need treatment. As long as I work within my own limitations and keep all of that in mind and rest if it's hurting and do all these things that I've been talking about, then it's been fine. Okay friends, that's all I've got for you today. If you are interested in me doing a video like this or a blog post like this that is more specific to something like rigid heddle weaving, I'm also happy to do that. I have a lot of experience with that as well. So just let me know down in the comments if that would be helpful to you. I have written a detailed blog post with all of these points included, plus some more that I probably forgot to mention in the video today. So I will also leave that linked down below. Until next time, happy weaving. Instead, I chose a piano bench. So instead I chose a